Welcome back to another exciting episode of our panel discussion, The Social League. Hi to all our viewers, and thank you so much for joining us once again. My name is Marilyn Garces, and I will be your moderator for today's discussion. Today we are joined by a learner as well as a representative from the Ministry of Education. So on today's panel discussion, we are going to dissect the status quo of the education sector. But before we do that, we are going to have our daily promo. So stay tuned for our daily promo. So, welcome, Ms. Aisha.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming. Ms. Aisha, you are the Director of the Ministry of Education.
Yes, in the Directorate of Programs and Quality Assurance.
Okay, and welcome Jemima. Jemima, you are a learner from
Delta Secondary School. Thank you so much for having me today, Desiree.
Thank you so much for coming. I know that on today's panel we were expecting 3 guests, but things didn't go according to plan, but we can still run with it today. Okay, so on today's panel, I wanted us to dive into the educational sector and how things are going at the moment. So we do know that schools will be reopening on the 4th of August, and we are also aware of the fact that the University of Namibia has increased their admission points, which was first 25 in 5 to 27 in 5. And we also, yes, those are our main focuses on today's panel. So my first question would be to Jemima. So now that schools are reopening, and how do you feel about going back to school amid this deadly pandemic and the new variant?
To be quite honest, I do not feel very safe. That would be the short answer. Reason being that this new variant is much more contagious than the last one, and now even the youth are susceptible to the pernicious effects of COVID-19. I think prior to the closure of schools this year, we have seen how the stringent regulations were more stringent on paper than in practice, hence the increase in the number of cases. In all honesty, I would feel much safer if the limit to the number of learners in classrooms were to be reduced to a number like 10, for instance. Because the reality of the matter is that we have to go back to schools, especially the senior grades, grade 11 and 12, because we are facing upcoming exams in a couple of months. And I think it's important to note that the benefits of face-to-face learning exceed far beyond just the educational component. Schools serve as a place for we as learners to grow in a cognitive and an emotional sense. So it's very important that, the regulations and provisions are made for these regulations to be implemented so that we can go back to what was once our safe haven and feel safe in that space.
Oh, wow, thank you. Ms. Aisha, I also have a question for you. So Jemima mentioned going back to school and exams as well. So what I wanted to know was, what are the procedures that are put in place for when a learner or a teacher tests positive amid exam or a very important test?
Desiree, when we, in last year, we already put these procedures in place. We have also an agreement with Ministry of Health and Social Services So that, for example, if a learner is positive or in isolation, in those isolation facilities, we then make provision for the learner to be able to write their examinations there and be administered by the nurses. They're obviously under very strict conditions and making sure that there is no infection and sanitizing the whole situation. But yes, we do have those in place. For our learners, for example, who wrote last year in the Ramatek Center, there was a special room for learners who had tested positive that keeps them separate from the other learners so that they do not miss their examinations.
Okay, okay. So what I want to know is, Jemima, you are a grade 12 learner.
Yes, I am.
You are an AS level learner as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay, how do you find doing the AS level curriculum?
Honestly, I think the novelty of things and the amount of workload is overwhelming. And initially that threw a person off, but now that we're getting used to things with, our school did hybrid learning in the beginning, and now we're more shifted towards online learning because of the whole COVID situation. But now that we've eased into it and our last term results showed us where we could improve, it's becoming a bit easier. But it's, it all boils down to the individual at the end of the day. Not everybody can cope with a large amount of workload, especially people who aren't used to self-studying. So it is quite an adjustment.
Okay, considering the fact that it is an adjustment and that a lot of learners have said that the AS levels can be quite challenging, now that the admission points have been increased, do you think that the 27 points are attainable?
Honestly, under normal conditions, I would think it's attainable. But now we have two factors to consider. It's the change in curricula and also the effects of COVID on the Namibian child's education. So from a pragmatic perspective, COVID coupled with the difficulty and novelty of AS level makes it much more difficult for the Namibian child to attain 27 points in grade 12. Statistics last year showed that the pass rate declined because of COVID. Now, I just want you to think about this from a realistic point of view, that yes, it is a good thing, because we should not underestimate the capabilities of the Namibian child. But in that same breath, we need to think about how implementing this abrupt change amid this our current chaos will only overwhelm the Namibian child, making it much more difficult for them to attain those 27 points and making it to university for quality education.
I agree. And that actually brings me to my next question for you, Ms. Aisha. I do know that the AS levels were introduced to improve the quality of education, but a number of learners failed to qualify for AS levels because of its adversity, and that it is actually factual that an ample number of learners are finding the new curriculum quite challenging. So what was the reason that the Ministry of Education felt the need to introduce the increase in the admission points, considering the pandemic and also the learners already struggling to cope with the new curriculum? So why yes, I think you understand what I'm trying to ask.
I think maybe to come back to Jemima's point,
Yes.
this was not an abrupt change. You know, the review of the curriculum has been going on since 2014, 2015. And it is a result of the education conference that we had in 2011. So you must imagine that process has been starting already from 2011, where it was found that we need to strengthen our educational outcomes. We need to strengthen the quality of education and what we are putting through to university and tertiary institutions. Because what you see in education is the same picture you see in university. You have a lot of children going in the first year, but very little throughput to the end of university. So you have a big cohort starting, but maybe only 30-40% of those children who start university finish. And we have that same picture in the Ministry of Education, in formal education, where you have got a lot of children entering the school system, but not enough of them coming out with quality grades and quality symbols. And you must remember that, so this curriculum review has started from pre-primary up to grade 12. So it's been implemented systematically, that the children that are going through the system are being prepared for the AS level now, and for the new curriculum. And the idea behind it is also that we have so many children dropping out that the system now allows you really to make it to the end of grade 11 more. Where, remember when we used to have grade 10, you had such a huge loss of learners there. So we've really tried to make it so that learners stay in the system and at least get that ordinary level certificate. And you know, it's very important to note that the previous grade 12 certificate, you had the majority of the learners only having subjects on ordinary level. So they pass with an ordinary level certificate. But now with AS, you're passing with a higher level certificate. And it's no more this system of when you're in grade 11, you start off with higher grade, and then through the time you downgrade, but you start, everybody finishes ordinary level and then you progress. Not everybody is capable of doing higher level subjects, you know. In our normal system before AS, not everybody was capable of that. Not everybody is academic. Some people are artistic and they are vocationally inclined. So the system is really trying to give everybody an opportunity to get a basic qualification.
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. So now that we have settled that, I actually want to dive into something that's very crucial, because I know that, or we know that we are approaching a time of the year where school can become very intense. School can become very demanding. And learners, like now, with this pandemic, we know that we have lost a lot of people, a lot of families have lost loved ones, and a lot of kids have been left as orphans, and that can have a psychological impact on these learners. And schools are set to reopen soon, and I want to know, as a learner, Jemima, as a learner, what are the measures you think that the government can put in place to help learners psychologically and mentally? Because mentally school can be very taxing. It can take a lot out of you. So what do you think that the government can do to help learners?
Well, I think the government can implement two things. Firstly, mental health days, which is then at least, say, 3 days per trimester, and then children are allowed to take a day off where, you know, when they come back the following day and no homework is done, they understood, because it is then taken as a mental health day. This child needs to recuperate, so that day is set for that particularly. The second thing is, I think the government can start with the implementation of systematic screening with the collaboration of a mental health institution and mental health experts such as yourself. And with this, these mental health experts work with school counselors to help identify and assist learners that struggle with the psychological burden that COVID has left them with to bear. And this can be done through having the learners fill out online surveys regularly, or having them fill out questionnaires in classrooms with teachers on the general and classroom behaviors, so that this data is then stored and used to select the psychologically troubled learners, to identify them and then work with them and give them the necessary tools to overcome and heal the trauma that COVID has left them with. In this way, the government will not only be emphasizing the importance of mental health in schools, but it will also be making it more accessible. And this is the beginning of healing the wounds that COVID has left us with as a nation.
Oh, wow. Okay. Thank you so much. So I know that Ms. Aisha, you are actually a psychologist by profession.
Yes, yes.
So what, maybe you can give us a better perspective also. So what are the measures that the ministry has planned to put in place to help learners and teachers psychologically?
Okay. I think Jemima makes very, very valid points, and the ministry already, and has had for a long time, since 2018, we launched the National School Safety Framework. And the framework looks at, you know, creating a culture of care and a good environment in the school with positive relationships between learners and teachers. The type of relationship where a learner, where teachers are able to notice and identify when learners are not doing well. Because I think it's about relationships. If a teacher knows you and knows your circumstances and knows the type of person that you are, if you start changing your behavior, you know, if you become withdrawn or quiet, the teacher is going to pick it up, and that's going to be an indication. But the ministry has also, with time, we've developed our counseling manuals. We're currently actually now busy with training our teachers on how to provide psychosocial support. And these counseling trainings, they specifically deal with issues of bereavement that our learners are going through, identification of of challenges that learners might be facing. So, you know, it's a question of our tools are there, but it's also about capacitating. And that's not always easy, because we have a lot of teachers, and we don't just want the life skills teacher to be able to provide psychosocial support. We want every teacher, because the life skills teacher is maybe not your favorite teacher. Maybe it's the maths teacher, and you should be able to go and speak to each and every one of your teachers to be able to get the support that you need. But that is a process, you know. But we work very closely with Lifeline, Childline, with the other NGOs that do provide online counseling that are there to support. Within the pandemic, we've been working very closely with Ministry of Health and Ministry of Gender Social Workers to also support where we don't have capacity. There's a good referral network between the school counsellors, the regional school counsellors, and the social workers, where they, you know, maybe where it's a problem that is beyond what they can handle, to be able to refer it there. So the ministry does have systems in place, and I think it's maybe just for us to really make it better known and really engage with children and tell them where they can get help, because the help is there. We just need to tell them where to get it.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, Ms. Aisha. And now, lastly, I just wanted to ask if there is a message that either one of you would like to give to the learners as well as the teachers who are about to return to school. We can start with you, Ms. Aisha.
We actually yesterday received some data analysis from the Ministry of Health and Social Services, which showed us that the difference in infection rate when learners were in school and when they were now on winter holiday was nothing. It remained the same. So what I would like to say is that we need to go back to school safely, but it is our personal responsibility to take care of ourselves. Learners need to adhere to the social distancing. They need to wear their masks. You know, we did a study in the beginning of the year, and the teachers were doing well, but the learners, the minute they leave the classroom, the mask is off, they stand together in groups, they play together out of school. We cannot control what you do. So we're begging you to please adhere. Please take care of yourselves so that we can get back to school.
Yes,
I think that we are going to face a lost generation if we don't get our kids back to school. The little ones are missing out so much on the foundation phase, and that is the building blocks for future academic success. If you don't learn to read there, you're not going to succeed later. So begging parents, teachers, learners, please take personal responsibility so that we can get our children back to school. Thank you.
Jemima?
I definitely agree with what Ms. Aisha said, because I realized that before school clothes, we weren't really responsible as learners. So I would really like to urge my fellow learners to take responsibility, because the failure to take responsibility now just means doubled responsibility in future. So I'd really like to urge my fellow learners to take responsibility for our actions and be accountable, and also adhere to the regulations, because they are stringent with reason. You know, it's not unnecessarily that these people are making us wear masks all the time and sanitize. Nobody wants to do that for fun, you know. So please, please, please do adhere and do wear your masks and sanitize.
Thank you so much. And I do think that we all want to return to normal, because a lot of countries overseas, people are back to normal. People are not wearing masks. Everything is happy days. So I do think that we all want to return back to normal. So I do urge each and every one of you guys to get your jab, as well as to keep safe, sanitize and wear your mask at all times. But there we have it, everybody. Thank you to all our viewers who joined us today. As for me, this was a very fruitful and informative discussion. I really wish that we could continue it, but that is it for today. From me, Desiree Garces. Thank you for joining me. See you guys soon.